Hey, everybody, welcome back to the You're Not Broken podcast. Today, we're going to talk about menopause, life in the spotlight with Naomi Watts and her new book, Dare I Say It. Welcome.
Thanks, Kelly. So good to be here.
You've been working on this book for a while. I got to meet you. I was actually thinking today, when was the first Swell conference? 22?
Yeah, I believe so. And before that, I was, researching and developing my company, Stripes Beauty. So definitely, and even before that, I had talked to a friend about writing this book, the book I wish I had when I was going through early menopause, and feeling quite isolated and scared. And I thought there needs to be a handbook because even the internet was not active like it is today.
Yeah.
So I was not really getting far in conversations with friends. Doctors didn't seem to know a whole lot. And so I felt really lonely and wished there was some kind of guide book that was useful, informative, but a little bit of fun as well and
Yeah.
sexy and like telling me that it's not the end and that I'd get myself back eventually. So
Yeah.
I
So
sat on
needed.
that idea for a very, very, very long time. I didn't ever think of myself as being a writer. Yes, I'm a storyteller, different kind. So it took a while to pluck up the nerve.
It's beautiful that you blend storytelling with science and fact, right? So it's not so heavy-handed of like, here's the 200 things of facts about menopause, but it's like, it's tied in with stories and your journey. And you had the great privilege or horror, however you want to say it, of like intersecting infertility with menopause kind of at the same time. And those are both isolating experiences.
Yeah, I mean, it was enough shame that I wasn't a natural woman that could, reproduce so easily whenever I wanted. So I went through all of that with my partner, who was very supportive, my partner at the time. But I still didn't feel pretty relaxed at all. I felt nervous that, if I couldn't reproduce, then what was my worth? Ridiculous
Yeah. All the
ideology.
stuff we put on our society puts on us.
Right.
I think we spend our whole adult years trying not to get pregnant.
Yeah.
And I mean, I want your opinion on this because I have so many people our age, they're like, I wish I knew. I wish somebody told me. I wish
Yeah.
I had this. And then so like the people who are trying to tell the younger women, like they don't want to hear it, man. Like there's something
Yeah.
about just the younger being like, that's for like way older. And you're like, well, mid 30s is when this starts happening for
Well,
some
I
people.
knew I knew that one's fertility changes at 35, but I didn't know that also means you're probably going to experience some perimenopause symptoms. In fact, I never even heard the word perimenopause until possibly meeting you in that room, 3, 4 years ago. So it was, and it would have been a much nicer word, much more gentle. Like I just got told close to menopause, panic.
Right.
So yeah, but I mean, not to contradict you, but I do find that the millennials who are just skirting the edges of menopause
Mhm.
now, they are feeling a sense of relief, as what I can gather, that they're like, oh wow, that's cool. I don't have to do all this legwork. You guys did it for us.
Yeah.
And it is an intergenerational thing. And when I speak to my mother's generation, some of them are like, oh, what's all the nonsense about? It was fine. I sailed through, but I think they've forgotten, truthfully, a
Yeah.
lot of them. But yeah, you get different opinions about it. But for the most part, I think I think they're pleased that we have, opened the conversation and taken a lot of the shame away.
Yeah, absolutely. I was at the Menopause Society conference in 2024 and was talking to like a reproductive endocrinologist, so people who help with infertility. And I went up to him and I said, "Listen, this is my theory. There's no data on it." I'm like, "But women who have children older, like their body's like, here's your child, boom, menopause. Like it just goes, it's like this final like let's get this baby made and done. And then the body's like, and menopause. And I'm like, I've never read this. I just see so many women go through it. And the reproductive endocrinologist was like, oh yeah, that's a thing. We see it too, but it's not published on, like, there's no like scientific data on it. But there's something about like having that child older and then the body's like, and we're done.
Really? Wow. It
Yeah.
just suddenly, well, that's what happened to me. I suddenly, went straight into it. And the minute I finished breastfeeding my second child, um, but, like, and we've spoken about it before, but for the listeners, I was experiencing symptoms way before I even had my blood taken, and my doctor said that I was close to menopause at 36. I was having night sweats, I was having migraines, and I was having irregular periods.
Mhm.
So the writing was on the wall. I just didn't connect the dots. And, it wasn't until, that fertility diagnosis was given to me that I really understood it. And still, it took a lot of time to understand the multitude of symptoms that came afterwards.
One thing that I was shocked with, like, the doctor parts in your book stick out to me, and two of them, the first one, which has to do with this, is you were checking night sweats on all of the intake forms for years. And
Mhm.
then you're like, what's the point of the stupid intake forms if nobody's doing anything about them in the first place? But it wasn't like you were like, I'm fine over here. Like, you were filling them out truthfully, and nobody ever did anything about it.
No, I mean, it really was just chalked up to an allergy to something, PMS, or, you know, yeah,
And
they
I think it's also
couldn't.
the dismissal of women of like, it's not that bad though, right? Like,
Yeah,
your
yeah,
night sweats aren't that bad though.
right,
And like,
yeah.
you have to
We're
like fight for your suffering instead of being just believed.
I mean, this is the thing, and we go into it in the book and everyone's books out there are speaking to this. I think that we get really used to suffering as women. And I mean, you speak in the book about it. Have you suffered enough? And, right from our early days of having cramps and, um, we're used to it. And so we expect it. And we don't want to complain. We are programmed to suck it up.
Yeah. Especially you don't want to worry that it's going to be threatening your job possibilities or, being
Yeah,
taken as somebody who can do hard things.
right, right.
The other thing that was super interesting, just from like an industry standpoint to me, was that actors have to get physical exams before every movie.
Yeah,
Is that
yeah.
like illegal? Like,
Sometimes,
we legally sign off she's fit for the
yes,
job?
yeah. Well, sometimes it's very, like, I mean, they're always mandatory, but some are more comprehensive than others. And, as much as peeing in a jar or, an EKG and some are just tap the knee and look in the air and down the throat and, tick, 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 as long as you can do all that. But when the movie is financed on your name, you're called what's called it's an essential element. So there's an insurance thing that they really have to cover themselves, that you're not walking in with a whole litany of
Yeah.
issues,
That
medical
was that was
issues.
super fascinating to me. I'm like, "Huh, who ends up being the doctor who's like, I okay people for films?" It's just like fascinating a fascinating niche. The other thing that, we talked about previously and you explain in your book so nicely of like, you weren't just having like a urinary tract infection. It was like it was
Chronic.
disrupting your life.
Yeah.
Oh, chronic and chronic and chronic. And how you want would you share because that's something my world is like tying both menopause in with like the basically pelvic menopause for
Yeah.
we don't want to say GSM because it's too long of a word. But like people don't understand how that's tied to changing hormones.
Yeah. And I knew of UTIs from my 20s, but a few of them, and I have friends who had them. And I remember the euphemism, it was called honeymooners disease or something.
Mhm.
Too much sex, but I didn't realize that it was coming for me in menopause. And so I just didn't understand what was going on. I went to different doctors and they put me on different forms of antibiotics, and then it showed that I was resistant to the antibiotics. I kind of was just running around in circles. I was taking supplements which were making me bloat and have digestive issues. Um, Real painful experience. And
Yeah.
really, to be honest, Kelly, I don't think I really got a handle on them until I spoke to you when I was
Oh.
interviewing you for the book. So I kind of
Mhm.
got a free, a free,
You deserved it after years
yeah,
of no
consult.
answers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. Unless you have someone, I have to take my socks off. Sorry, I'm overheating. Um, um, unless you are seeing someone who is properly educated on these things, then you are going to be running around in circles. You have to advocate for yourself and be, the CEO of your own body and piecemeal it together, unless you are lucky enough to get in the room and have access to a specialist, someone who's properly educated on this. Otherwise, yeah, you'll suffer for months.
Yeah.
Um,
I
and this went
vaginal
on for months.
estrogen.
Yeah,
Totally.
that
Vaginal
was, yeah,
estrogen is like this it's like this double shame too, because it's like, oh, like if number 1, your hormones are changing. Number 2, this is like private parts. And so it's like completely not discussed.
yeah. And I remember actually when I had my second baby, here's an overshare. I had my doctor, my OB, gave me a tube of estrogen, and I was like,
Amazing.
"Really? Why?" Um, and I didn't get it. But
Yeah.
looking back, now that I'm
Yeah.
educated on estrogen, she was really
Yeah,
that
you're
was an
like, "Damn
amazing
right."
thing. Yeah, yeah. This is
That's
also
cool.
the doctor who treats me now. I live in New York City, and she's I think 70 or over now by now, and she says she'll be using her HRT to the end.
Yeah. So many women. They're like, "Bury me with it or burn me with it. However, I'm
Yeah,
going out." Like,
yeah,
I'm taking it with me. What was really concerning to me in reading your book is realizing, like, you have access like, you probably have access to, like, the best doctors in the world. Like, you're highly connected. You know people who know people who know people, right? And I think about that, and I'm like, look at what she had to go through with this perceived amount of access. And then I think of, my woman in Kansas and my woman in Saudi Arabia and my woman in Kentucky and like all of these people where I'm like, this is why the books and the podcasts and the Instagram are important because they don't have the access. What do you think about like it being such a big problem?
yeah. I think there's reading that you can do before you go to your GP or gynecologist, and you should get educated. And yes, find the doctors online that you trust. Obviously, be prepared when you go into that that consult with your medical history, with your questions, with your symptoms, your family's medical history, obviously, and the great article that Susan Dominus wrote a couple years ago for the New York Times is a great one to read and get educated. And it's not going to be everyone's choice to go on HRT or safe for everyone, I suppose. But that's a conversation that you have to have, and you have to make sure your doctor is willing to go there. I just don't love the gatekeeping. And if they are, it's probably because they're not educated enough themselves. And so that might be the time to switch
Yeah.
providers.
Yeah. I mean, I
Uh,
always that's the exact same advice that I give people, and it still breaks my heart because it's like it puts so much more burden on a woman to have to go see another opinion where I'm like, guys don't have to do that as much.
mm, mm,
Like
yeah.
but I really do think the tide is turning. Like doctors are learning, doctors care a lot. They just but the more women that come in and say, "Hey, I think we should try this," the more the doctors are like, "Oh, this is safe. This is necessary."
Yeah. And just know that there's risk benefit with every single medication. And, how bad are your symptoms? How much are you suffering?
Yeah.
Um, and, yeah, and of course there are always short-term fixes like sleeping pills if you're not sleeping, and um, antidepressants. But yeah, if the benefits of hormone therapy are going to outweigh, then I say go for it, and it's safe for you, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's definitely helped me.
What was like your most surprising thing you learned about menopause when you were researching to write this book? Was there something you were like, no way?
Well, the skin, and again, it's all connected to, you know, from scalp to vag, we say it stripes beauty, and we've got, you know, our vaginal moisturizer and lube for,
What do I have? I
down
have
there.
this. I have this next to me. I have the full Monty next to me.
Yes, the full Monty.
That's the
Yeah, that's a
body.
great body oil,
That's
which
the body
is
oil. And look, I have my
absorbs
Stripes water
nicely.
bottle. I think this is from the first Swell
Yeah,
conference.
you're an OG.
I'm an OG. I have an OG water bottle.
But yeah, the skin. I was battling skin issues, uh, and every day on camera with red, angry, raw, irritated skin, and I didn't know what to do. I got given cortisone cream from the dermatologist. It was again a short-term fix, and it just would keep going. And so I had to change up all of my skincare. Things that I was using were no longer working for me. In fact, they were disruptive for my skin. Had to change my ingredients to much gentler things. And I really just started researching it, and became fascinated by ingredients. And then I was like, okay, I'm getting knowledgeable on this, and I'm also looking around and seeing these brands. They're, some of them are great, and some of them are helpful, and some of them are just kind of pissing me off because they're telling me I can look like a 25-year-old,
Right.
and I don't want to look 25. I didn't like looking 25 when I was 25. I'm going to try to, go with what I have right now.
Yeah.
And I don't suffer fools. I'm not going to look like that again. There's no reversing time.
Mhm.
Um, how do I get to my best self? And so I wanted to create a brand that really spoke to her in that place that she was in, at that, and in an authentic way, and help her feel seen. Because the messaging, to your question earlier, it's not the end. That is the most wicked, cruel message out there. It's absolutely not the end. There is so much to do. We're living longer. We need to feel our best and optimize our health, and that means leaning into it. And so yeah, I wanted to create a brand, and that provided education, community, and hydration.
And hydration. I think it's only been a few years where people have been starting to speak up against this anti-aging messaging, which is pervasive, and realizing like it's like against the laws of physics to not age. Like it's so impossible. And this branding message of buying all this anti-aging flies in the face of what Mother Earth does, right? Like it's
Right.
so illogical at some point. And so I think really being like embrace where you are, solve the issues and concerns you have, but there's no anti-aging that
No.
is even logical.
Aging is living, and it's a privilege to be alive. And so that was just a marketing term that worked for a period of time, and we've got far more sophisticated now, and so that just can't exist.
Yeah. I mean, I think you were one of the first of say groundbreaking of actually talking about this in a public sphere, and now more and more and more women, Gen X, certainly the boomers, are coming out and saying like we're still here, our careers are better than ever, the momentum is gathering. I mean, look at the big films right now and the Academy Award nominees,
I
and like
know, it's incredible.
it's
All these
incredible.
women in their 50s driving stories. When I was told in my early 30s, when I was just getting just launching with Mulholland Drive, I was told you better work, 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 because it'll all be over at 40.
And who
Um,
told you that? Like
Oh,
who
everyone. There
are
was
the
like a
experts? Like the
yeah,
industry.
producers, agents at the time that I had, and
So it's
you
kind of like the industry just that's just a law.
yeah, that was it was
Okay.
it was it wasn't a law, but it was like this is the high probability that no one really wants to see you on screen if you're unfuckable was the term.
Unfuckable. God, that's
Yeah.
so crazy. It's weird. I don't know if you know this or not, but so in medicine, women don't want to look young because it's discrediting because
Right.
people won't
Won't be taken
believe. Yeah.
seriously. Right.
You won't be taken as if you have any experience or any knowledge because you look so young.
I understand that. I've gone into rooms with
Right?
doctors in their 20s and gone, "Really? You're just
Yeah.
a few years older than my kids."
Yeah. And so like in the physician forums, it's like, listen, I get told that I look young a lot. What can I do? Should I wear glasses? Should I cut my hair different? How do you respond appropriately when somebody, because you don't have to tell anybody how old you are, right? Like, how do you respond appropriately when somebody says, how old are you? So it's
Yeah.
like an opposite thing in medicine. And then I got to the point in my career where I was one of the more senior partners. I still look pretty young. I have great skincare, but like I'm no longer the one who's the youngest. And I'm like, I
You
like
can
being
relax
here.
now.
I like being in this place. Yeah, people aren't asking me my age all the time.
Yeah, it's definitely changed a lot, and in the last, as you say, a few years, I think we're seeing that shift take place. But um, and in storytelling, yeah, I mean, look at Nicole Kidman playing the sexiest role of her life
Yep.
in over 50, and Pamela Anderson, Demi Moore
Yep.
speaking to aging
Yep.
specifically. So the shift needed to take place, and I think it will continue. And our stories matter at every point. So I'm glad that I'm glad to see it take place.
Is it just like a little bit of everything that is explaining the
Yes,
shift?
all things
Yeah.
coming from every angle all at once.
Because it's
I
not
would
some
say,
person who's like, I decree we
yeah,
employ the
yes,
50-year-olds,
and now
right?
change forever.
Right. It's like the
No, it's
audiences want it. The
And where
the
do yeah, what do you think the initial thing is that created that change? I honestly think it's because we're living longer. Am I off target there, do you think? I feel like we're living longer, so we demand better health.
Mhm.
We're putting our hands up saying, I need treatment. I'm not ashamed to admit that. I'm not going to suffer. So that's one piece of it. In storytelling, I think yeah, it's the same thing. We want to tell our stories. We are getting treatment. We've got energy. We're still around. The body works. I've got things to do, and I've got experiences. I've got
Yeah.
great experiences. I've been through ups and downs. This face tells the story.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a depth of wisdom in storytellers who are our age, and people want that. Like, we want good stories. Who's got good stories? The people who've lived long enough.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's kind of all comes together and, we're all growing up together, and as I think especially as far as, like, healthcare and hormones and, like, taking care of ourselves, we're seeing our aging parents or our aging grandparents, and we're starting to question the status quo of, like, is frailty the only option?
Yeah.
Is doing nothing for years at a time really what living life is? So we're starting to question because now we have so many people who are so much older that we're kind of reflecting on.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, that makes total sense. I'm seeing it in my friends' parents with the frailty thing, and so here I am slogging myself in the gym with weights. That is
Right?
I
Every
have to do
half
it.
a pound of muscle is precious.
Yes,
Like,
exactly.
and
Protect those bones.
it by default will go away if we aren't doing something to keep it.
Oh, I to keep muscles nowadays. I mean, I remember the days where, oh, I don't want to lift those weights, and I don't want to get bulky. No,
Now you're like, I
please
wish.
let
Yeah,
me bulk.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Let me have a teensy bit of muscle. I have to
exactly.
work so hard to get it.
I know the way your arm looks after a good arm workout. You're like, can you just
Yeah.
stay that way?
Yeah.
It
The
looks
rest
really
of the day.
nice. Yeah. Do you think more from your industry, like women are getting into positions of power, and so that's why we're also seeing age being represented better, of like, we've got more directors, we've got more producers, we've got more people being like, these stories matter. Cause I just think it's like all these different pieces that are coming together to be like,
Yeah.
look at this wonderful time right now.
Yeah. Women running studios, women, female producers, and like you say, directors. Yeah, it's all of those things. And I think it's changed in the last 5, 10 years, and I think it'll continue to will continue to hold space in that way, and it's heartening.
I think the other exciting thing, which is like, reinforcing your statement of like, this is an amazing time. Let's make sure you're educated so you can feel good because like great things can happen, is like deciding to write a book at any age. Just you decided to start a skincare company brand, like
Yeah,
it,
and get married in my 50s for the
and get
first time.
married
Let's
in your
not forget
50s.
that. Yeah,
Yes.
there are
Like
things
there's
you can
so much
do.
stuff. Yeah.
It
And
is
this
not
this
the
old
end.
status
Yeah,
quo of like, well, you didn't train in branding and marketing and get a college degree when you were 20. What are you doing
right.
starting this? Right? Like
Yeah.
we don't think like that anymore.
No, no, you can think outside the box and take a chance on yourself based on the fact that you've had experiences. I definitely was taking risks early on in my career, but it really was just spaghetti at the wall. It was with naivety all the way. And now I say, well, I know what failure looks like. I've experienced it, and I managed to find a way to repair, move through it, and take on something else new. So why not? Let's see what it brings.
Oh, I love that. Are you noticing a shift when people come and talk to you now about like their concern about hormone risks or their concern about, menopause stuff? Are you seeing the fear dissipate with these years of education we've been doing, or do you think it's still super pervasive and we have a lot more work to do?
Yeah, so people come to me knowing that I'm in the space now and lock, stock, and barrel. I've been here, and they ask me about the best doctor, or if I don't know one in that city that they're living in, I can ask one of you guys and for a recommendation. And they want to talk about their symptoms, and they ask me about my experience with HRT, and I always preface it with, I'm not a doctor. I know quite a lot, but I'm still not going to push anything on anyone. But these are the things you should ask for going into your appointment. And like I said before, just don't accept gatekeeping, at least not from the conversation.
Mhm.
Um, but I am seeing an openness. And, I mean, it wasn't that long ago that I had to wait for my progesterone. So, again, encouraging that things are changing.
Mhm.
Um, going from the whole of the study and everyone flushing their hormones down the toilet to that percentage of people now going up incrementally. It's not what it was,
Yeah.
unfortunately. But yeah, I say don't fear it, just explore it
Yeah.
first.
I know I always joke, or I make it a joke because I'm like, what if there was a time when 40% of women were on hormones? And I'm like, it was called the 1990s. Like,
Right. Not so long ago.
like it's so crazy. Like we've done this before. We've supported women in men. We probably weren't perfect. I wasn't practicing in the 90s. We probably weren't perfect, but it was one of the top 5 most used pharmaceuticals in the nation. 40% of women were on it. Like it's already happened. And we're just trying to like
Right.
get back to the 90s. The 90s are trending. Like
Yes, exactly. That's so funny. Yeah, the music, the jeans.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, to me I'm like maybe we're just trying to get back to the 90s, and it's not crazy to think many more women can be supported on hormones because we've already done it. We just had such
Yeah.
a devastating, I mean, and to your question of that, like the role of the media in creating the fear of hormones in 2002. And what are your thoughts on that? It was, what we know now is that was wrong, but it was like the fear that the media drove into doctors, women, that hormones
Yeah.
kill you was devastating to, now we know, hundreds of thousands of people.
Yeah, it was. And yes, more than 20 years on, we're still experiencing doctors who fear it. And even if we're now getting educated in different ways, sometimes our doctors are just not as up to date as we want them to be. But and then I mean, with the work that you've been doing with Dr. Sharon Malone, Mary Clay Haver, uh, I mean, the whole group. Who
Yep.
who am I? I'm here.
The
Here's a
menopause.
memory. The Menopause. Um, there's so many great voices out there who are helping things, but then there comes like resistance again, and so there's some lack of alignment, even amongst you guys, and about what the benefits truly are, and I again never want to be on a soapbox saying this is what you must do. Get educated and really, walk in with as many questions based on your medical history and your families, and be prepared. And, you know, if you've got time, read, and all of your book. Dr. Salas Whalen is another one of the great doctors. Dr. Mary Claire, Avram and Carol, Avram
Yeah.
Blooming, Estrogen Matters. And and I expect that you will meet resistance along the way, and just get granular on it. Yeah,
Yeah, I
I
got
just
resist. I mean, you know this because you're a thought leader in this space. Like, not everybody probably loves what you've created all the time. And I got some
yeah,
resistance this week. A doctor said that I was saying that doctors aren't doing a good job. And I'm like, well, because we all think we are doing a good job until you actually get on Instagram and you hear all these women reaching out to you saying how much they're suffering, and then you're like, not all doctors are doing a good job, and we actually have to be able to say that sometimes. And
yeah.
so yeah, that was this week in pushback by me doing what I'm doing.
Right. You can't please everyone.
Can't please everybody.
No.
Let's talk about the swell conferences, because I think that's a really unique thing that you do, and Stripe prioritizes. Is it's not just a platform, but it's an educational space where women can be like, this is a trusted venue where we bring in science and we really try to educate. So you and the Swell, Stripes and the Swell, have been together now three years. Is
Yeah,
that
we've
right?
done, 3, and we also did one on the West Coast as well.
Yep.
So I think we've done 4 in total.
Very cool. Do you see that continuing? Do you want to continue that?
Yes, absolutely. And
Yeah.
you know, the last one, it felt like it's such an engaged community. They want to learn. And I think doctors equally want to care.
Yeah.
They care about people, and they like the idea that they are being useful, right?
Yeah.
That it works for everyone. And I just the community aspect of it, the sharing the stories, and women feeling seen finally, and has been just so meaningful. I mean, I've felt incredibly charged after those weekend experiences, and connecting with women, and I equally sometimes when I go on the street now and I see a stranger coming up to me, and I think, oh God, I haven't got my lippy on, and they want a selfie, um, but no, they want to say thank you for giving me permission, giving me the dialogue to speak to my partner about what I'm going through. I otherwise
Huge.
would have not have known. And that, if I've made a difference to one person who might tell her friend, who might tell their friend, that is that's what I've always wanted to do, is tell
Yeah.
stories to help them reflect somebody else's, the
It's
truth
the
of what
best thing
they're
in the
going
world.
through.
It's like you've changed somebody else's life because you showed up and you were the most you that you could be. And it's
Yeah.
incredibly
Well,
powerful.
I've always wished I was a doctor, because you guys really are saving lives. And I'm just like, I hear as an actor wearing somebody else's clothes and saying somebody else's lines of dialogue, and like, but it turns out we do have a bit of an effect on how someone thinks and sees themselves in the world. So
Stories
it's not,
are everything.
they are
You know,
meaningful.
as
Yeah.
tale as old as time before writing. Stories are everything.
Yeah,
And I think
exactly.
that will never go away.
Yeah.
Well, I'll put all the links. The book is Dare I Say It,
Yeah.
which we're very
Dare I
excited about. We're
say
gonna
it?
hold it up.
Lots
Everything
of lots of
everything I wish I knew.
information in here from experts like you, and stories of mine, some incredibly personal, and other friends. So hopefully the information in there is useful, but not so dense that you lose focus. And hopefully the stories carry you through, and make it
It's
somewhat
perfect.
fun.
It's a fun read. You forget your learn. You know, like the best is like you forget your learning because it's a fun read. It's like that's what it is. And I gave away a copy
Thank you.
yesterday at an event I did.
Oh, good.
So we're
Thank you.
spreading the word. Thank you so
Thank you,
much for joining
Kelly.
us today.
Good to talk. Thanks for
Thank
having
you.
me.